Once again, we're back at Ferrari of Central Florida. This time we've got a Ferrari 296 GTS. This is the Spider, so that means obviously it's a convertible version essentially in Italian speak. What's different? Not a whole lot. We did the GTB earlier on a couple of months ago. In fact, that's the first video I've ever done, and I was completely blown away by that car. The speed, the handling, it was insane. That car had Assetto Fiorano, which is the track pack essentially. But I felt like that car was a little too stiff for daily usage. No longer the case. This is a standard GTS, does not have the Assetto Fiorano package, and it's operated quite differently too. In fact, visually, you don't have the decals anymore. It's actually not decals, they're painted on the Assetto Fiorano. It's actual paint. You don't have that stripe anymore. The car doesn't really look like a catfish any longer. I think it's got the classic traditional Ferrari lines. It looks just a lot better as a result of that. And I had said prior, I said, skip the Assetto Fiorano package, skip the visual pack. You don't need it. And look at it. It's a much cleaner design. So what do we get? Well, essentially, it's the same car. Power stays the same. Weight increases very marginally. When you're talking 820 horsepower, it's such a fractional increase. A little bit of weight increase is barely noticeable, especially on the butt dyno. Let's come around this way. So we still have carbon ceramic brakes. That's not going anywhere. You've still got your shields over here, which are obviously a very important option for any Ferrari enthusiast. What I particularly like is this interior. Much lighter, easier on the eyes, airier feeling with the top open and everything. Here's what I'm a big fan of. Take a look at that roof. Well, the lack thereof right now. It almost looks like this car is a Targa. It's very, very pleasing aesthetically. I like the fact that they kept this, which I believe might be structural. As a result, the car doesn't really lose any of its shapeliness. The aesthetic remains very, very consistent. It still looks very much like the GTB, except this area right here is just missing. I had mentioned that I thought that the GTB looked perhaps a little plain, maybe a little vanilla. I still think that this car is overall very soft in its contours, in its shapes. It's a bit of a throwback to the 308, but that's okay. The more I look at it, the more I like the car. But I'm still hoping that a Speciale version does kind of add some more aggression to the look of this car. All right, now it's time to go inside the GTS. So the interior of the GTS is basically the exact same thing. You've got your nav display over here. You've got a little secondary screen over here for the passenger. You've got some quick controls for the AC. You've got your throwback to the gated shifter, window controls, your rear window behind the top and the top itself. So, oh boy, this is a sore subject for me. You have the lack of a button, so when you fire up the car, there's kind of a bit of, the emotion's a little bit missing. You're not pressing a physical button, you're pressing a little haptic feedback sensor. You do have some other controls over here. You've got your windshield, you've got the Manatino switch, you've got this touch sensor that cycles some functions. You can use this little button right here to activate your heated and cooled seats. You've got, very self-explanatory, voice control, voice command, Bluetooth, speed limit assist, turn signals over here. And I gotta say, I've actually grown to like these turn signals, especially compared to what Lamborghini offers. I wish that there was a screen somewhere here, but this is a nice and clear, free, empty space. Still a physical screen present somewhere that is accessible and not over here, which kind of seems a little distracting. I do prefer that overall, but this is still fine. Some other touch sensors are over here. Parking camera, parking control, mirrors and adjustments, ride height, well, just the front lift, headlights over here as well. That's really about it. So again, to start the car, it's this. And it's roared to life. It does sound good. Let's take a look at the materials. I love these seats. They're so nice. They're more comfortable than the previous car. They're easier to look at on top of that. You've got some suede over here. You've got some carbon fiber over here and over here. Overall, a more luxurious package than the Assetto Fiorano car that we drove earlier on. And by the way, yes, the door opens with a click of a button. You do have an emergency release back there. And I have to say, actually, for a convertible, these doors slam very, very well. They have a very solid thunk. There's no rattle. What's common is windows typically rattle over here because there's no pillar. So this is very firm, very in place. Doors open and close beautifully. Let's take a look at how the top looks going up and down. Now, if you didn't know any better, this looks like a GTB, but obviously you can see the seams over here, and if you know about this hoop right here, then you know this is the GTS. But effectively, the hardtop still looks like a standard coupe, and that's one of the things that I really, really love about hardtop convertibles such as this GTS, this 296 Spider. Let's take a look at the trunk, and it is a lot bigger than I thought it would be. There's also a lot of stuff in here. Look at that. That's a pretty decent sized trunk. There's really a lot of stuff in here, and you could definitely take this grocery shopping, for example. Let's take a look at the specs. All right, let's start this car up. There we go. Let's take it out of race because we are not on a racetrack. Let's keep it in sport. Later, I'll put it in race when we start hitting a few bends. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to drive with the top up because we don't want a lot of sound and noise interference clogging up the mic. There we go. Woo! Still sounds amazing, obviously. So the biggest thing that I'm curious in is really the difference between the Assetto Fiorano package and the standard suspension, because I found the Assetto Fiorano to be a little too rough for everyday use, and I'm the type of person that believes if you buy a supercar and it's your most expensive car, that's the one you should use the most. I have other cars. I have two used old BMWs, an M3 and an M5, and those are the ones I actually garage quit because they're so old. One is 14, the other one's 16, 17 years old. And they're the ones that are more likely to break and leave me stranded somewhere. Whereas my supercar, my McLaren, is newer. It's only 4 years old. And that's the car I paid the most money for, and that's the car I'm going to use the most as well. That's just the way I think. So far already, just a few minutes into this drive, the suspension is a lot more tolerable than the one on the Assetto Fiorano. And I am in sport mode. I'm not driving in comfort, although actually I believe sport is the default mode as far as comfort is concerned. And we're going to take this, throw it around a few bends, take it over a few rumble strips, see how the suspension copes. Straight line performance is already an established factor. It's insane. The quarter-mile times this car can do, which I essentially roughly accurately predicted, are correct. This is a car that'll do somewhere in the nines, mid-nines, high-nines, at mid-140s, and with probably under the right conditions, it could probably do high 140s. This car is just that fast. It's 820 horsepower. So this power is intoxicating. We've got a bend. We're going to take this bend right here. And we've got another bend going left to a right. And now we're going to do some rumble strips at 25 miles per hour. Very, very, very composed over those rumble strips. It's very similar to actually how the Maserati MC20 absorbed those exact same impacts on this stretch of road. We're going to do that again at 30 miles per hour. So immediately, this is the ideal way to spec a 296. Whether you get the S or not, you don't need the Assetto Fiorano package. I promise you, you don't need it. Granted, those two turns that I took earlier on, Yeah, you felt a little bit more roll, if you want to even call it that, because compared to anything else out there, this car is still glued to the road. But it's so inconsequential that I think most people, 99.9% of Ferrari drivers, wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. And this sound that this engine makes, this little baby V12, still epic. And all the noises, they're all still just as much fun as they were the first time I drove this car. This right here that I'm on is a particularly rough road. This would be kind of the equivalent of a road you'd find in a place like New York, Los Angeles, and it's coping with all these impacts, these broken pieces of concrete, broken chunks of asphalt. This suspension is coping with everything fantastically. Even at the speed of 60, it's wonderful. What a well-balanced suspension. Now we are in race mode. We're gonna hit those same rumble strips, this time at 40, 35. It still feels almost the same. Now we're gonna look for the biggest difference in handling. So sharp impacts still feel about the same, but you do feel the car moving a lot more over this bumpy road. So that in itself right there is a noticeable difference. This steering has tightened up a teeny bit. Throttle response is changed dramatically. All right, we're gonna take another turn, this time in race mode. And here we go. Oh, that's a substantial difference. Substantial difference. The car is a lot flatter, yet when you hit those little sharp impacts like those rumble strips, you don't really feel a lack of comfort. It's very impressive. I have to say, Ferrari and especially Maserati as well, I got to give both of them credit. They've really been doing some amazing work with their suspensions and how they've been dialing and balancing them. A car like this, you can drive this every single day. It won't beat you up. These seats are amazing as well. They're so comfortable. They're not overly grippy, overly tight, overly stiff. They are well cushioned, but not too cushioned. They seem to have just found that perfect balance in giving their clients exactly what they want out of a supercar. And then brakes, turn, perfect. Perfect. That's the best way to describe this car. I'm gonna go back into sport mode just because these roads suck, but really just such an incredible job of balancing this car and its performance and just allowing the end user day-to-day accessibility, the ability to road trip something like this. And you've got a terrific trunk up front as well. You could definitely stuff a lot of cargo up front if you were to take this somewhere on a road trip, let's say. So a marked improvement, this car over the GTS with the Assetto Fiorano. And I mentioned this before, the material quality is very high. The build quality is very high. Over those terrible roads back there, not a single rattle back there, just not one. It's very, very interesting how much of a difference race mode makes in response, throttle response, and whatnot. It's a bigger difference than I would imagine. So overall, this car actually does earn its fair share of improvements over the last car that I reviewed. And most of that comes down to suspension. I believe whereas the last car had a grade of about an 8.5 for a suspension, this will be getting a 9. And while a 0.5 or half a point doesn't seem like a big difference, it really is. You're getting very, very close to a perfectly balanced car. It's just that good. One more time. Overall, if you're looking for a 296, you get this spec. You get a GTB or GTS without Assetto Fiorano. Add a few other packages if you want. Me personally, I like to keep my supercars a little bit stripped down because I just don't need a bunch of this extra tech, like this second screen over here, for example. What you ultimately do get here is a car that is set up to take on any track, set up to take on your city streets, set up to take on your beautiful glass streets. If you live in Central Florida or Arizona or somewhere in Texas, this is the car. One more time. Oof. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Listen to that. Oh. Said it before, you don't count out Ferrari. Don't ever count out Ferrari. I think a lot of people wrote off Ferrari with a few other cars, such as the Pura Sangue, and they're gonna regret that. I think cars like the 296 GTS and the GTB will prove a lot of people wrong. That's just the way it is.